Hey, Justin Dyson, Dyson Apiaries. Just going to do some quick inspections here. It's the end of October. Going to make sure these hives have enough bees and enough honey stores, and they're still queen right and ready to get through the winter. So we still have just a little bit of goldenrod aster coming in right now, fall flower flow. Been feeding some of these colonies, so we're just going to take a quick look. It's getting into that colder weather. We have a nice day here. It's in the 70s, so I'm going to be able to get in here before it starts getting too cold. Hang with us. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump into this hive. I'm actually gonna skip the top box because my hopes are that it is basically completely full of honey at this point. So I'm gonna jump in here in the bottom box, see what we have going on. I'm going to gauge the weight of this box and kind of know how much stores I have, and it's plenty heavy. This colony has, that's a good 75-80 pounds right there. This hive doesn't have a great cluster, but they're not bad either if we look down through them here. Look down through them, we have ample amount of bees. I wouldn't rate this colony as fantastic, but sustainable nevertheless. And they're, if you see out here in the front, they're working pretty well. So there's a lot of field bees out right now as well. I'm just going to pull a couple frames out here. My hopes is that over here on the side, I give them a little bit more smoke there. I smoked a lot of those bees down before we open the top, so a lot more bees down there than we think. My hopes are that over here on the side we have some honey stores like we do in the top, and then as we work toward the middle we still have a small brood cluster. So this hive has pollen in this frame, no honey. Not necessarily concerning because the amount of stores I saw in the top. Hive needs about 30-45 pounds of honey to make it through the winter around here, so they have ample amount in the top based on the weight I felt in that box. So I'm going to make sure we have eggs. It's positive to see they have pollen still. Sometimes they get a little short on pollen, and we can see in this frame here is ample pollen. Keep raising those healthy winter bees. Hardy, I might should say hardy winter bees instead of healthy. Haven't found any brood yet. Hopefully we'll get into it here on the next frame. And there we go. A small clustered brood pattern there. I see eggs. So we have some, I'll smoke the bees off there just a little bit. So we have eggs down in these cells. We have some brood. It's not a great pattern. It's a little bit sketchy. I've done some mite checks on these, and it seems we have the mites under control for the fall. I'm just gonna look at one more frame here, make sure we don't have any diseased brood or anything like that. And then I'm going to be done. Don't necessarily have to find the queen. I found eggs that are nicely centered up in the cells, and they have cut their brood rearing back substantially, as they typically do here. We're almost in November, so I'll look at this one more frame. That frame also has some eggs on it, so they're still raising a little bit of brood. They could stand to be stimulated a little bit, but we are almost in November, so I'm going to say that hive, they're covering a good 9 frames here in the bottom, and this is a double deep colony, so sometimes they kind of form more of a column instead of a whereas if you have a shallow feed super, they get suppressed down a little more, but in the double deep situation, they kind of shrink in from the sides. It's just a little different. I'm going to make a note here that this colony is ready for winter. It's 1020. They are queen right, and I'm just going to put okay. I don't need any other notes besides that, because everything I see there is okay. It's not fantastic, but it'll do. So let's look at one more colony here. And we always want the bees, they'll do it on their own. We just have to be careful about our manipulations and how we're moving things around. But as we're getting into this time of year and it's getting cooler, we have to be careful that we're not moving honey frames down in the middle of their brood cluster and things like that. We need to make sure that the honey is on top and around the sides of them, because as the winters get cooler and the bees bring their cluster inward, they are restricted from moving as much side to side, but they can more easily move upward. And the natural progression through the winter of the European honeybee is to move upward into their honey throughout the winter. So that's the way we want them oriented going into the winter. That hive is a little bit light. Probably still okay, but kind of glance at the frame here. So see how that metal's cleaned out of that frame. So this hive's still actually a little bit light, and that next frame over is pretty much empty. That frame's good, that frame's good, that frame's good, that one. So they have like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 good frames of honey. We'll say 5 because there's some missing in the middle. 5 frames of honey would be, maybe, I would say maybe 30 pounds of honey in there. So they're right on the edge. They would be okay, but I may feed them just a little bit more. No, this hive is, oh, but yeah, we get into the next frame and they have a lot of honey stores down here in the bottom. This hive is not very strong. They're okay, but they're not very strong. So I think this was a split I did in July, and we just got them up into a two box configuration. Let's make sure they're still queen right here. Yeah, this colony needs some more stimulating. So I'll probably continue, as we're still experiencing some warm days, I'll probably continue to give them a little bit of 1-to-1 sugar syrup to stimulate them to raise some more bees. definitely making a little bit of fall flower, but the thing about fall flower is it's merely you know, if we have a good fall flower, it's like it's sustainable. They're not necessarily going to make a surplus of honey that will sustain them through the winter, but instead it just kind of maintains the stores they have. So there is some brood there in this frame. Yep. She might be up in the lower part of that top box laying just a little bit. I'm not really showing you that. A lot of times there'll be a little bit of brood up in there. So if you want to push your queens down and get them out of the top box this time of year and really pack that full of honey, feeding a 2-to-1 or heavier syrup mixture will they're going to fill the honey back on top of their cluster. So as if there is brood in the top box, as that brood hatches, they're going to backfill that box, and that will in turn force that queen to move back down in the lower box and set them up in a good winter configuration. All right, let's go through this hive right here. I think this one may be a little better than those other two. You know, a lot of this apiary right here is splits, and they're not quite as strong as hives that I may have had in honey production last year, so still need a little stimulation. Yes, this hive definitely has more bees in it. Let's get more like it. We'll see how they're doing on honey. So sometimes when you have a lot of bees like this, their honey stores sometimes are a little less because they're still raising a lot of brood, but not always the case. We'll look at the notes on this hive. Yep. So I believe this hive came back from sourwood honey flow, so they've had a lot more honey to work with. And they've been able to continue to raise those healthy bees. Look at that cluster. Now that's what I want to see this time of year. Those last two hives were kind of not quite there, still need some stimulation, but this one, on the other hand, that's a cluster I like to see. Let's see how heavy this box is here. Figure out how much honey they have. And they're actually okay. That see, that frame is empty on the outside, but capped here. That one's capped all the way across, and this frame is capped on the inside but not the outside, so we'll just count that as one frame, and then we have 8 other frames full, so 9 total frames of honey. Definitely ready on food stores. So let's make sure they're good and clean right here. Just a little bit of honey and a little bit of pollen right there. That's a good frame of pollen. I love the smell of fall flower honey. I always thought it smelled a little bit like butterscotch. Only problem is I really don't like butterscotch, but I still kind of like the smell. A little seal brood there. That's a good number of bees in this colony. I wished all of my bees always looked like this, but that's one of the ways we select for queens, is you have to look at things like this and see how they're going into the winter. But the curious thing will be, how do they come out of winter? Sometimes bees like this will just keep raising brood throughout the entire winter, and they run out of honey. They have a lot of brood. Not necessarily a bad thing. as long as they know when to stop. Didn't see any eggs on that frame. It was mostly sealed brood, so I'm gonna look at one more frame. Got a little dance going on here. Let's just be here. Let me see if maybe there were some on there. She may have a little brood nest up in the top, and maybe that's where she's laying right now. So I like to see a few eggs this time of year. If I don't, you can't be sure they're queen right. They're really cutting back this time of year, so sometimes it's a little more difficult to find a little patch of young brood. Yep. Here's some really young larvae in there, and that's really young larvae right in there. I don't see any eggs, but I see some larvae right in here that are less than, they're 3 days or less. They're really young larvae, so I'm satisfied with that. I'm okay. She's probably up in the top laying. The hive acts queen right. Got a heck of a nice cluster. Good honey stores. This is what we're looking for in the winter. Shook those bees off there because they were kind of clustered up. Didn't want to mash a bunch of bees. Always tighten your frames up. Keeps the propolis from building up. This is the only problem with running double deeps. They're heavy. Like, especially one that's up in the top like this. Just make sure that queen's not laying there. And that colony is in definite winter form. If you haven't already, go ahead and
punch that like button and sting that subscribe button. Bye!